First of all, show of hands. Who here has got a centre of excellence in their organisation? Not very many. A couple at the back. Fantastic. So some data that came out of 10K Advisors said that 91% of the top performing implementations around Salesforce had a centre of excellence. And what we're seeing now is more and more organisations starting to put them in place. I've been running centre of excellence panels for the last 2 years, and we have some very common questions. Like, how do I get started? How do I get funded? So I wanted to assemble a panel here who again, experience from a number of clients, thinking about how centre of excellence gets implemented, and some of the common questions. I've got a bunch of questions. I'm sure there'll be a great debate, but we'll actually throw it open to the audience as well, so you get a chance to get some of the questions you want answered, raised for the panel. So, I said I've got a panel here of Mike Speer from Salesforce, and then Dan Rodriguez, Dan Manca, and Adam Franklin, who are all architects with Hike 2. Correct. So first of all, let me get started with you, Mike. One of the first questions is, again, I haven't got a centre of excellence. How do I get started, or where do I get started?
So the first thing I think you need to do when setting up a centre of excellence is you have to determine why you need one. And there's a couple core reasons. One reason is a lack of trust. You don't know if your teams are going to do the right thing, have the right vision, execute properly. So some of those CoEs are around technical architecture, best practices, process improvements. But what I've seen most in my work with my customers is that they're new to Salesforce, they don't know how to proceed. And inherently they don't trust themselves, and they want to have group think sessions and to set the direction from leadership and execution of the delivery teams. So as they're processing through, once they figure out why they need this group involved, they have to figure out what the scope of the CoE is going to be. And like I said, sometimes it can be, what are some of our development best practices? How do business teams interact with technical teams? What's the direction that we're taking with the product or the suite or our output with our customers? So once we have the what defined in the scope, how do you know who's included on it? And again, that depends on the why. If it's a technical oversight center of excellence, you probably need some of the best technical minds you have. Most of the time when I'm involved in setting up a CoE for my customers, it's a combination of their internal stakeholders, their internal leaders, and some folks from my organization. Most of my engagements I'm set as a strategic advisor to my customers, and so I'm able to bring in other people. What's the marketing cloud best practice? Or we're building an integration layer around our Salesforce and our data center. We need MuleSoft experts to come in. So once you determine the why, you know who's going to be involved. Some of that conversation also is around the business discussions of what do we want our product to do, what input do we need from the business, and how do we work together to get that. Once you have those three, the what, the why, the what, and the who, you got a pretty good start on setting up your CoE.
Okay, so that's great. So who's going to lead this? I mean, Dan, who should the CoE report to?
Thank you. So really that depends, consultant answer, it depends. No, it depends on the size of the organization. Who you want them to report to is generally someone who is high enough to enforce or encourage the standards, the methodologies, the goals, and everything that the CoE agrees on. Usually, that's going to be as someone at the C level, or it's going to be maybe a group right below them that basically has direct input on setting the goals, the strategies, and everything. But really, the key is you need executive buy-in if the CoE is going to be successful, if it's going to get off the ground, if it's going to deliver value. Because, just a personal anecdote, one time, way back when, I was at a company called Strategic Energy, and the development team that I was part of, we developed this great process that we thought would serve everybody for how to submit IT tickets, how they'd be processed, prioritized, how you could watch them and everything. That was great. So we were going to unveil this to the rest of the groups, but the thing is, the big meeting where we were going to unveil it, what happened? All the managers and directors who were invited to that meeting declined. They said no. So when we got to that meeting and we had the development team, what it looked like was just us dictating to the rest of the groups, this is how you are going to do things now, says us. And just just a whole room of people like this basically scowling at you. You can imagine how that was. So that did not get off the ground. Why? Because it didn't have executive buy-in. So.
And that could be IT, it could be business, it could be a combination.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes back to what Mike said. I mean, what is the why of the COE? And that's going to determine more specifically who it needs to, who the best group is for the COE to report to.
But for, I guess, both Mike and Dan, that COE may change over time as the implementation changes, nature becomes more strategic, becomes broader. You maybe acquire new orgs, and suddenly there's a different agenda for that COE. That could change over time. So you don't have to start with everything you'd expect to see out of a COE. You could start quite small and then build up from there.
Oh, absolutely. Excuse me, Dan. Sorry. So I do think there are timeframes and expiration dates on centers of excellence. You set them up initially to get you moving in the right direction, get the right processes in place. And if you're a well-oiled organization, your teams take over and enforce and start self-imposing and self-dictating what needs to happen and learning from your experience. It kind of ties into the agile methodology and how self-policing teams work, and they know what works for them. They know how they interact with the business, and the COE does morph, and sometimes you lose people, sometimes you need to bring in new people because you're expanding into different areas of the business or new technologies to tie things back to why we're here. AI comes in, we don't have any good AI people in-house, then we need to bring in a partner to join that center of excellence to help us guide from their experience. So always looking for those fresh ideas, keeping the board members or the participants of the center of excellence diverse, you'll get a much better output from it.
So the other thing, AI is now becoming a lot more, is forcing organizations to be a lot more strategic in terms of some of their implementation, system implementations. So again, that's also upping the ante, driving the need to actually have a center of excellence. So Adam, let's go to the other end of the table. So who's going to pay for this?
So I think ideally, as Dan mentioned, you want the person paying for it to be somebody who's got some juice with the company. CIO, great. If it's the owner of the CRM, maybe it's not the CIO. You want somebody who really sees the value of that investment strategically and is also looking from a bigger picture. Because what can happen, and I was talking with a colleague about this morning, you got your marketing team and your center of excellence. Which one's getting cut from the budget first? Well, probably the center of excellence, unless you've got somebody thinking about what's the ROI on that center of excellence. So you just need somebody who, one, can pay for it, and you also want somebody who's invested and has the power to ensure follow-through. You don't want a center of excellence that has no teeth. And you also want it to be central, right? It's central to the organization's strategy as it relates to CRM. Because if it's not central, it's not really your center of excellence. It might be an outpost of excellence somewhere that has no ability to make sure everybody is kind of following through.
So, it could be funded centrally by IT. It could be delegated, so therefore all the business units who buy into it end up funding it. So there are different models about the way people fund it. And I think, again, back to Mike's point, when you start small, it's funded centrally, but over time it may actually morph to being actually more delegated. Can
Absolutely. I think the main thing is to make sure that it is strategic and it's not something that can be opted out of.
Okay, so let's think about how do we build a business case? I made the bold claim 91% of all successful organizations have a COE. So first of all, do we need to build a business case? Who wants to say that?
Yeah, I'm happy to take it. So, I think there's two things at play with developing a center of excellence. One is distributed teams, right? Like people aren't in the office, they're not co-located much anymore. So that knowledge sharing is lessened. And so this forces people to come together so you can build that interdisciplinary team that is needed to represent all aspects of the business. The other aspect of the business case, and really driving towards an agreed upon set of results is the availability of tools. You can go out and just buy a tool these days, right? That was not always the case in the enterprise. So when you have people doing that, you have these department level buys and you have multiple people going different directions or potentially the same direction. and you don't have the capability to control that. So, through the Center of Excellence, you can set an agreed upon set of guidelines and be able to operate, cohesively as a unit towards that. And that business case should include all of that. It'll include who pays for it, who's a part of it, who leads it, what is the post Center of Excellence plan, right? The goal should be the democratization of knowledge, right? You should be moving towards the ability to have that knowledge in each area where it's needed, right? That should be one of the stated goals of the Center of Excellence. So, the business plan is going to include all of those aspects to get you from the formation to the execution once it is run its span.
Let me just follow up on that. There was a really good session at Dreamforce by Amazon Web Services, AWS, and their head of their Center of Excellence did a great session. He did 10 minutes of slides, 10 minutes of questions, a couple more slides on the Q&A. But one of the slides he put up very early on was the mission of their Center of Excellence. And it's Salesforce Success Central, which is the name of it, is a dedicated central team providing Salesforce expertise and managed services to help teams across Amazon accelerate their Salesforce journey. So I think it picks up on some of the things you've said. I think that the last sentence of the mission is interesting. We raise the bar on security, compliance, operational excellence, and financial responsibility. So I think they picked the words very carefully in terms of what that mission is. But I think, again, you've echoed that in terms of the panel so far. We raise the bar on security, compliance, operational excellence, and financial responsibility across all of their orgs. Now, even if you've got one org, that still applies. But if you've got multiple orgs, then suddenly you can leverage all those skills. So which leads me to the next question. Dan, you talked about tools. So what's the approach on tooling? Someone says, right, I love this DevOps tool, or I love this backup tool, and we got multiple orgs. Is it top-down, saying, right, you will all use this one, or is it look at which org is picking the best one and roll those up? Again, I'll start with you, but anyone else want to join in terms of, have you seen that being resolved? Because people have their favorite thing, and they don't want it taken away from them.
Which Dan? I'll go first. So,
Dan two.
Two Dans. We should have planned that ahead. Tooling is difficult. Everybody's going to have an opinion, and there's so much overlap in the tool sets that the decision by committee is going to be challenging, and it's typically not how you would want to make a decision like that. But in this framework, we have the opportunity to create a rubric to work within to make that decision. So I don't think there is probably one answer, and there may even be a possibility to have multiple tools that have overlapping capabilities. But that needs to be determined by the group, right? I think that is the goal of the Center of Excellence, is to really define how we make decisions. And whatever the group decides, right, the group has to adhere to. I think that's one of the sort of baseline functions of a Center of Excellence is, it's not an opportunity to come up with great ideas and then people go do their own thing anyway. You have to agree that this is how we're going to proceed.
I mean, that ROI doesn't come out unless you actually get some level of consistency.
Yeah.
Sure. I think I'll just add to that. It's really a combination. You initially asked, should it be a kind of a ground up or should it be a top down approach when you decide what tool? I think it depends on both. Part of the idea of a Center of Excellence is we're trying to avoid someone at the top that does not know what's going on in the weeds, just making a decision blind. We're trying to bring in as many perspectives as possible. However, when we do that, those many perspectives are not always going to get to one agreed upon tool. And so you either have to do one thing. You have to make a really good business case that this one outlier group really does need its own tool in addition to the other one that we decide on. Or what we say is, look, someone at the executive who buys into the Center of Excellence is going to have to say, all right, I've heard all of you guys. I realize that not all of you quite like this tool, but we have to choose a direction, and here it is, after I've heard all your feedback. So I think in general that just leads to a better work environment, because even if someone's suggestion is not taken, at least they'll feel better going forward knowing their feedback was at least considered. So.
And I've got another thought too. The one thing that we haven't said yet is, what's the value add? When you're building your business case, if your ROI or your value isn't well defined, then why do you have a center of excellence? Even with the tooling or how the group is organized or the individuals involved, what's the purpose and what are we trying to either eliminate waste, improve value, delivery, whatever it is, identifying that value as part of the initial setup. That's the why. Why are we doing this? To be better at our jobs, to deliver better customer service, to move our product in a better direction. Without that value add at the very beginning of the entire process, it doesn't matter who pays for it, because the cost is the skin in the game. And you need, like Dan said, you need to have representation for all parties involved, or most of the parties involved, to push the value, to drive the business value so that you get good results from the Center of Excellence.
I'd like to add to that. When we talk about tooling in particular, there are negative outcomes of having a diverse set of tools within a single organization. It's kind of the same as letting everybody create their own data model, right? You run into issues down the line. If you think about AI, okay, the same data might be identified 20 different ways now. With tools, though, it's interesting because a lot of the CoEs I've been involved with, part of what they've done is kind of centralize services. So when you think about tooling for, say, DevOps, the question I have is, well, would it be better to centralize those DevOps tools and centralize the DevOps strategy and just say, well, you're not going to worry about that. You can focus on your primary business goals. We'll take care of that for you. Or do we want to let everybody kind of come up with their own approach? There's pros and cons. You certainly want to have room to innovate. The other thing I would add is the Center of Excellence, in theory, has experts on it and people that are thinking more broadly than somebody who's focused on their business. So they may be thinking about why it might be a good idea to centralize or to not centralize in a way that an individual stakeholder might not be.
Was somebody said you go faster on your own, but you go further as a team? And I think you need that altruism to say, okay, if we're part of this, we'll be part of the Centre of Excellence, we'll gain some benefits. It may slow us down, maybe shorter term, but actually we'll come up with a better outcome. And then back to better security, better financial responsibility, ultimately lower cost and better outcomes from it, whether it's implementing Salesforce or any system. So let's change tack a little bit and think about, often a Centre of Excellence is a hub of innovation. You hear often that they'll pick up ideas and then disseminate them. AI clearly is the most disruptive bit of innovation that's coming through. How do you, I doubt you have examples of how people are currently doing it, but how do you think people should be approaching this, particularly when we're at the very early stages. We're at the flip phone stage of iPhones. Yeah, we're still trying to work out how it all works. So again, some thoughts on how a Centre of Excellence can insert themselves into the organization and help get innovation, particularly around AI, working.
I mean, I think I can answer by saying what not to do, right? Don't follow the trends. I think that is part of what is happening right now. We're seeing that a lot, right? People are saying, well, we need it because everybody else has it. And what we've talked about so far is like, that is not the right approach, right? We need a reason for doing this. We need to define our outcome. So, I think there are right ways to do it, and the rest of the panel will probably talk about that. But, what you don't want to do is just, chase the trend, chase the most recent, sort of article, right? Create it for the purpose of, SEO and writing a blog post and having a webinar on it. If you're not going to be able to do it and do it right, then you're doing it for the wrong reason.
Okay. It really goes back to something. I'll refer to Mike again. He started out by saying, well, what is our business purpose? Why are we forming a Center of Excellence in the first place? It's the same question when it comes to AI. I agree with Dan. We want to avoid just implementing AI because it's the current buzzword. I think we've all seen that attitude. We need it because it's the in thing, so we're going to be left behind without it. We need to have a good understanding of why we need it, and to supplement that, as something that Peter mentioned earlier, let's get a clear definition in everyone's heads of exactly what AI is and what do we mean when we say that, what kind of AI. Let's drill down to exactly what we want AI to do for us. it was kind of eye-opening when I was just having drinks with one of my old coworkers one time, and he just said, "Do you realize that ChatGPT is just really, it's a very sophisticated predictor of what the next word should be?" And I said, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." But that's the kind of understanding that you need to disseminate first, and with those questions answered, you can move forward and say, okay, now that we know what it is and now we know why we want it, how can we actually best use it? So measure twice, cut once.
So I'll take a little bit different approach. I think it's the same as any other emerging technology. You have to think about how it's going to impact your business, but at the same time, you have to keep the lights on and keep your business running. And so how do you let a small group of people, let them run wild with it. Let them see what you can do. Take an aspect of your business. I mean, that's why we have dev instances and test instances. Like if we want to embed it in whatever product we have, we can do that in our own contained area and space to make it a safe trial and safe proof of concept. I used to work at one of the local grocery chains here, and we had a chance to ask our leadership, what was the biggest impact of technology that you've had in the past 30 years? And the answer really surprised me, and it was refrigeration. And being able to have frozen aisles of food in the store at all times instead of having ice boxes, or I don't even remember what he said they did before that, but that was the biggest impact. And as low tech as that is, that changed and revolutionized the grocery stores and how they were laid out and what food was available at the time. All the new technologies, we had new signage, new gas pumps, new checkout kiosks, self-checkout. That's all good and well and helps move the business forward, but not as big as the simple things. I had the pleasure of having a session here last year, and one thing I talked about was innovation in business. And the innovation isn't always this mind-blowing thing that you think is going to make you the next Google or the next Facebook or whatever. It's how does it make your business that much better? And that step in refrigeration, it's a small little thing, but that takes you to the next level. And I think having AI or any new emerging technology is the same thing. It may just be ChatGPT or maybe one of the bigger pieces, but having someone prove that out, how does it work? By introducing this to a COE, getting different opinions across the business, we're probably going to think about AI from a technical perspective. But if you look at it from marketing or someone else that you don't think is going to help, that may be the biggest win and may be the revolutionary piece that you're not even thinking about. It's coming from a different aspect of the business that's going to take the most advantage of it.
So what I'm hearing here is the Centre of Excellence actually can actually inspire that innovation and give people the space to practice, but actually, I mean, I think about what Peter was talking. He was talking about problems, platform, people, and policies. I think it's the fourth P, isn't it? Is some policies around how should we be playing, so we can actually play quite a lot, but actually still fit within some guardrails and feel safe. And then I think the other thing you said was collaborating across different groups, so everybody is starting to see what everyone else is doing. So the Centre of Excellence is actually almost the collaboration mechanism to make sure we're all learning from each other as we're all learning.
And that's where the diversity of it comes into, whether it's diverse technical backgrounds or business backgrounds or whatever it is. You get two ideas that don't normally go together and they clash, and you get something outstanding. And by including different types of people, different business roles, and up and down the chain and across the business, you get those impact points and inflection points where something's going to explode and make you jump to the next level.
You know, it's funny, earlier today, Shola talked about the value of interdisciplinary teams, which is kind of what we're talking about here, right? Ideally, a COE is not a bunch of technical architects only. If you're doing it that way, it's not right. I think I'm basically going to recap a lot of what, Ian, you and Mike and Dan have already said, which is you really can use that COE as kind of an engine of innovation as it relates to AI. I don't think it's so much the technical competency, but it's a place where you can start to develop that new culture of thinking about what problems are we going to solve here. And is this a problem we should be trying to solve with AI? And if so, how could we do it? What data do we need to do it? At the same time, and I think this also is part of innovation, if we think about a safe space to innovate within, the CoE is able to generate and work through some of those questions around responsibility and compliance. A few years ago, I was with an international manufacturer, CoE, and they were very concerned about GDPR compliance. And why were they concerned? Why is GDPR so important to them? Well, because big tech, like it or not, did some shady stuff with people's data and didn't make it easy to get away from that. So Europe passed laws. Europe is already passing laws around AI. So I think one of the things that a CoE can do very well to make innovation work well and make it work well for everybody is just to ensure that as we're going through this process of coming up with new ideas and thinking of new applications, that we're really thinking about, okay, is this safe, for everybody involved? Is it going to create some problems in society if we go down this road? Is it truly creating value? And is it ethical? Is it in alignment with, at least our corporate policies? I know Mike, Salesforce has done a great job of putting out some ethical guidelines that are, purely on their own. And that's valuable.
It didn't just put them out, it put them out and then it revised them. There was a big piece of work to go, actually, no, that we need to move the game on, and actually did a big piece of work revising those ethical principles.
Oh, sounds like you were agile. Wow.
Now and again, yeah.
I think there's an interesting intersection point to Adam's point there, right, between governance and centers of excellence, right? Governance is kind of a thing unto itself, right, that sits within and above centers of excellence. And I don't really know what the answer is, but it is something that we have to consider, right? There is a broader audience that we're trying to serve, and there has to be folks that are looking at that as well, right? If the Center of Excellence is serving as this innovation catalyst, then there has to be folks that are looking at all the other aspects of the business, outside of the business, to the individuals involved, right? There's a personal aspect of this as well, whether it's rewarding or, potentially nefarious individuals working on this. So, I think that's something we have to consider too, is how do we define within the organization's governance process, how do centers of excellence play in?
I mean, I was always told the first process you define in a business is the process for how you change. Because if you can't get a change in, then nothing gets started. I've been very selfish asking all the questions. Are there questions from the audience where, based on the debate you've heard, you've got questions you want to pitch in? Stunned silence. Well, I'll keep going then. So we've now talked about the Centre of Excellence, the sort of level of innovation. People talk about Centre of Excellence. I think there are 13 pillars. People go, I haven't got 13 people. So first of all, it's not 13 people, it's still different role types. So the question is about skills. How am I going to find those skills, and where should I look for them?
You mean the skills for the members of the
Correct,
CoE?
yeah.
I'd say to start, you're going to start higher in the organization. It depends what the skill set you're looking for, but you need a cross matrix of people involved in whatever the objective is of the Center of Excellence. Some people are going to have, you pull in your CIO, you're probably going to get all 13 or most of the 13, but also your CIO is not going to be involved in every Center of Excellence discussion, have to delegate and pull other people in. Again, I think it goes back to the why, and figure out who's going to be involved, what the purpose is, how you're going to do it. If you can't easily identify people with all those skills in your organization, you probably have a different problem in why you're starting up a Center of Excellence anyway, to address for gaps that you have in your workforce.
But it's part-time, and there may be some full-time, but it's a lot of it is part-time. Getting back to the CIO is going to be engaged in lots of other things, but is a representative on, say, the steering committee, helping define the vision, those sorts of things. So it's going to be a mix of maybe part-time, but again, as it gets larger, I think Amazon, I can't remember, they had tens of people on their Centre of Excellence team, full-time.
And I think too, you don't need all 13 skills all of the time, depending on what you're tackling, what the issue is. As the members evolve and as the purpose of the COE evolves over time, you're going to have people come in and out. And so the primary focus may be on a specific skill set, or you need 2 or 3 things. But at every time, you're not going to need every skill, every 13 pillar on the team.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. Thank you. I'm going to go a slightly different direction than that. In addition to looking for the necessary skills for the 13 pillars of the COE, I think if your organization is actually sophisticated enough that they're asking a question of how do we assemble a COE, I think the skills are probably going to be there. What you need to keep in mind is, I'll just use a cliche, you can't start a fire with wet wood. Really, I think it has to do with not just finding the skills in your organization, but the people who know what the COE is about and are excited about participating in it. Their enthusiasm, I think, will be contagious. And so even if you assemble a panel of 4 people that maybe don't represent all the 13 pillars, I think as people see what they're able to do, you're probably going to get some people in the organization saying, oh, let me volunteer for that. And then the COE grows organically.
Well, Dan, I think too, the opposite of that, people get excited because they want to join. People are get a little annoyed at what you're trying to do, and they think they can do better, so they want to contribute. So you're going to get it either way. The intention's either going to be good from excitement and passion, or on the opposite side, still passionate, but they don't agree with what you're doing, so they want to join to have an impact. Either way, you're still getting the best skills and some of the best passion involved, which I think goes back to the cost of the COE. If you get passionate people in there, there's less. They have their skin in the game. They want to make a change. You just got to figure out what that middle ground is between the 2 differing opinions, and that's why you have the Center of Excellence to find that middle road.
So it's interesting. One of the things that AWS said, because one of the questions out there was like, how do I get started? And they said the very first thing they did was they essentially formed a collaboration team. Like, who was interested? So let's actually surface all the people who actually care. So suddenly we got those names, and then they started to build almost a wiki of these are all some of the standards here. So actually there was a place where everyone could collaborate, and they went, oh, I didn't realize you were interested. Oh, there's some people over there. So it actually interesting if they started by going, okay, pick for attitude rather than skills. Who cares about this, and then start picking from those. You don't necessarily need to form like. Not everyone's going to be on the steering committee. You pick the right people for the steering committee, but at least you're surfacing those people. The last thing you want to do is drive this stuff underground by going, I know, AI, you're not allowed to use it. Well, at which point people just get their phone up and go, well, I'm going to use it anyway. It's actually, part of this is actually almost having an amnesty, like tell us everything that you're doing, let's get everybody out, and then you can start to pick from that group. And again, that's something we saw a lot from their Center of Excellence has been going for a while. But again, that level of sophistication, they then took a lot of that content and turned it into some proper knowledge articles. And a lot of it was like, how do I get stuff done? If I want a new tool, how do I get it through security? If I want to hire somebody, how do I do that?
Well, Ian, I want to go back to something that you reminded me of something Dan said before about Center of Excellence and governance. And I think a COE is, to me, it is one of its internal policing, its internal governance, because I haven't seen anyone be hired specifically to run Centers of Excellence. Consultants come in, help you get them up and running, get them set up, give you advice on who to bring in, have the purpose. But a good COE, they're not tackling every problem. There are working groups underneath of them. Okay, this working group will be, what's our maturity level? Let's rate our maturity level on this technology. Let's have this working group focus on how AI can help our marketing teams. Let's have this AI group this working group help figure out how AI can help our development teams. Let's look at tooling over here. So inherently, there's governance involved and structure. And this also going back to the passion piece, somebody's really passionate about their tooling, and I know developers will be really hands-on and aggressive about what source code tool I'm using. Let them focus on that, where their passion lies. You get more involvement, you get better collaboration. One thing as a consultant is, how do you make everyone feel they're heard? And we try to do that on every engagement that we have. Get better change management, get better adoption, get better agreement. You find the better path down and the best path forward to the organization by having structure and levels to the center of excellence and wider participation to drive the best outcome.
Okay, so I think we sort of imply there are these 13 pillars. The pillars are things like vision, leadership, governance, security, architecture, metadata management, innovation. I'm sure I've lost a few. Doc, bashful, what are the other dwarves? Sleepy, dopey, happy. But the point is, each of those different pillars has a skill set associated with it, they're all interdependent. And as you said, the skills you need for those may be different. There are some things which have to be in place day one. You want to know who the leadership team is and some vision for what you're doing with the application. You probably need security in place day one. Architecture needs to be in fairly soon. Not necessarily defining architecture, but defining architectural standards. So there are a series of these things which you can start to put in place, and it's fair for a small organization or a low-risk organization, it could actually be fairly lightweight. You could have a small org, but actually it's highly regulated. You actually need quite a lot of this in place. So again, how you set that center of excellence up, really back to your why, depends on also the environment. I'm a wealth management organization with customers in Europe and in the US. I'm worrying about GDPR and worried about CCPA. Security is an issue. We're playing with AI. That's an issue. So suddenly that's a high-risk type organization, and therefore you need quite a lot of governance in place.
Well, Ian, thinking just about, as you run through the pillars there, you mentioned a couple of them. This should be day one, this should be day one. One of the things and pitfalls that I've seen centers of excellence biting off more than they can chew on day one. And again, why is it set up? Well, we need to establish development best practices, or we need a governance structure around AI. Having that specific focus, you wouldn't be in business if you didn't have a lot of those pillars already intact. You're setting up a center of excellence because you need some additional thought. You need to evolve one of those pillars or multiple, but having that succinct focus on what this center of excellence is going to deliver. They could touch on multiple, probably will. You'll need aspects of those different pillars at times, but being very cautiously optimistic about how much evolution is going to take place, how many topics are going to touch, and again, going back, subdividing those into the working groups so that you're not choking on any one specific thing.
So, I mean, people in the audience, you might be sitting there going, hang on, I think we already have a centre of excellence, it's just not called that. There's an opportunity there to go, actually, we've got some of these, we have got standards, so some of it's actually now trying to then go, okay, we essentially have got the principles of the centre of excellence, we can now take it and use that as a chance to grow out some of those other skill sets. So let's think about it differently. How would you measure this centre of excellence in terms of its success? We talked about a business case, but we didn't ever talk about some of the metrics. By the way, this is the hardest question, because no one has a great answer for it, by the way, of all the panels I've done. But how do you start thinking about how you measure the success of a centre of excellence?
Okay.
Adam, no, come.
Oh, go for it. Oh.
So I think it starts with step one, which is what is your vision for this center of excellence? There are different things it can achieve, and why are you starting this? Is it because your deployments take 5 days? Or is it because you want to use some new technology and you feel like it's time to go down this road? And really from there, you have to have that conversation. Whoever is the executive champion of this thing has to define those KPIs, and the people involved have to agree that these are things we can measure and they are things we could deliver on. And then it's like everything else that you want to measure, right? You just figure out what is your unit of measure here. Is it reality-based? And then how am I going to measure it and how often?
And first job is baseline it. Because often the metrics you come up with, actually, you don't even have a baseline.
Yeah, I was going to say that it depends. I mean, that's one of the first things that the COE or the group that decides that you need a COE has to decide is how are we going to measure the COE's success? How are we going to develop, you've probably heard the acronym, SMART goals for the COE. How are we going to have specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound goals for the COE? And then commit to actually reviewing those goals every so often. I know that a lot of us in the room have worked with Agile. One of the most important things in Agile is if you can't implement anything else, implement the retrospective. So, I mean, the COE constantly has to look at itself and say, how are we performing based on what? Well, the goals that we defined at the beginning. And going back to something that Mike said, maybe the goals themselves can evolve. So I guess we're Agile in every way.
Dan, I think you gave a very consultative answer. Is you have to define your own KPIs and metrics for your COE. Oh, absolutely, it's a compliment. Yeah. No, so last year I worked with the world's largest transportation agency, and they were implementing Service Cloud because they had 7 call centers for the different modes of transportation they had across 7 locations with 20-year-old, I think it was Oracle CRM. And they wanted to combine all the call centers, change all their business processes, get on a single platform. And one of the first things they did, they didn't define a COE right away, but they defined their KPIs. Where do they want to get there? And they knew so I guess they started defining the COE at the same time of the project. How do they want to get down to? I just found out they released their metrics a couple weeks ago. They went from over 9-minute wait time to under 2-minute wait time. And getting that down by 50% was their goal up front of the project. They wanted to consolidate their business processes. They had 7 call centers, 7 processes, 7 phone systems, consolidate to one with an automated phone system with the name is escaping me, but you press 1 to talk to this group, press 2 to talk to this group. IVR system. They got the one IVR system. They wanted to produce accurate weekly reports. They couldn't do that because half the call centers were using Excel to log cases and storing them in SharePoint. They had trouble pulling any kind of numbers with under a month, and it always took them a month to get their numbers consolidated and collaborated and clean for their board meetings. So it wasn't necessarily initially the COE, but they've evolved to be that. How do they do support for other agents? They started Slack swarming. And I have a caller with this issue, what can we do for them? And so they changed their business processes. So some of those things, one thing I've seen people struggle with is defining those KPIs where we want to get better at something, but we don't have the baseline. We don't know how we can help resolve these people. But things like phone systems, we want to drop from 9 minutes to 4.5 minutes as our baseline. That's easy because we have phone systems in place. But figuring out if you do have a gap where you can't measure a baseline, how do we start measuring that? What can we do? A lot of times I've seen call centers, well, we don't create a ticket for every call that we get. Well, why not? Well, it's a real quick, we just press a button, reset a password. Why are we creating a ticket for it? If you're not measuring every interaction you have with a customer in a call center, you don't have an accurate baseline. You don't know what your workload really is. When I was an IT analyst, tracking every single thing I did, whether it was an email, a phone call, an instant message, somebody walked up to my desk, I would do the same thing. It's easier just to reset a password, restart the computer, help them shut off and plug in their printer, whatever the easy issue was. I didn't track everything. And I was doing twice as much work as my boss thought I was. So some of those business processes are hard to define up front, but if you know your gap, at least identify the gap, acknowledge it, and make a plan to fill that gap so you can start tracking KPIs.
Hang on, okay, so you said it was a new implementation, they didn't have a centre of excellence. But I would argue they currently did, because one of the pillars is you need a vision. Another one was you need standards. So you already talked about they needed some governance. So some of the things that they were putting in place were actually what you need, are some of the pillars of a centre of excellence. Is there a vision? Is there leadership? There clearly was if they bought Salesforce to go from seven Oracle CRMs to 1. So some of those things are in place. And I think sometimes we need to look into our organization and go, actually, we have got those skills. We just need to try and formalize them so we can then use that to say, there are some other things that we need to go and do. Actually, a center of excellence, one of the 13 pillars is architecture. We're not doing very well at that. We've already got the executive leadership team involved in this, and we're calling them a center of excellence right now. Can we get them to focus on architecture? Or at least give us the mandate to go and find the people to focus on architecture. I'm conscious we're getting close to time. And let's just run down from each of you either a resource you found useful or a thought that is useful to the audience in terms of, you're about to start a centre of excellence or you're trying to get buy-in for a centre of excellence.
So I'll keep this very basic. There's a concept in Buddhist theory, which is that people are always either seeking pleasure or avoiding pain. So when you're thinking about who should be in your center of excellence, think about people that are either trying to escape the pain or believe there is pleasure by participating in this.
Well, that's tough to follow. In my experience, it's been about empowering individuals. And so there are going to be folks that are interested in this, and managers should be doing everything within their power to give them the skills they need and the training they need to pursue this sort of approach and this methodology that we're talking about. So, if you are managing people or if you are someone that, wants to be part of this, standing it up or be a member or be a adjunct to an existing center of excellence, then there's really no time better than now to get started, even in the middle of a project, right? It's okay to take a step back and say, this is how we're going to be successful, right? If we are off track or even if we're on track, is it luck, is it skill? So let's put a methodology in place to be able to, take the next step.
I'll just come at it the only way I can from a consultant's perspective. Sorry?
It depends.
No, this time I wasn't going to say that. Because the other thing we have to do is a lot of times we have to try to convince a client what is best for their business. And a lot of times that's not just showing them the value it will add, but showing them that it's not as heavy a lift as they think it will be. So something that's been said on this panel is that a lot of the principles of a center of excellence, a lot of times if we put that slide in front of a client, the 13 pillars of a center of excellence, and that's a lot of syllables and a lot of pillars, and no, we can't do that. But showing them, well, here's what you already do. You may think you have 12 steps to go, but actually from what I see, you have 4. So let's work from that. So just from a very little effort, you can get a very big ROI, and you can start seeing some of those stats that we saw on the first slide, which is that all these most successful Salesforce implementations have a COE. You're closer to that than you think.
So I think there are two main qualities that a center of excellence can have to make them successful. And I've seen this with groups, I've seen this with projects of why they fail. It's having good communication and having good collaboration. The center of excellence is meant to bring people together to collaborate to solve a problem. When you're on projects that don't go well, you don't have good change management, you don't get input from everybody, people aren't heard. Without that collaboration on a project and a center of excellence usually in everyday work, something's going to fall down. And then the communication aspect of a center of excellence, every time I come across a project, a group where there's trouble, there's a communication barrier, whether it's realized or not. Maybe it's Dan saying something and I'm not understanding what he's saying just because of the language, the technical language, or I don't like Dan's accent, or I don't like, there's whatever it is, getting that communication up and running and frequent and easy to consume, kind of what you said about the slides, making things easy to consume and high levels of frequent communication. Why are we doing this? Small words usually work best. Why are we doing this? What do we hope to achieve? Why do we want you to participate? Making people feel like they belong to it. Those two things will make you successful, communication and collaboration.
So let me just pick up on that last point, which is actually, I think a lot of people are out there going, well, I'm a lone voice, so I'm the only person trying to put this centre of excellence in place. I've been surprised. Whenever we've done any mailings for the Centre of Excellence Roundtable, or for any of the events, one of the job titles we put in the drop-down, it could be architect, could be admin, could be consultant, but it could be Centre of Excellence leader or Centre of Excellence team. And I've been staggered by how many people are answering as they actually have that role type. And I think the email open rates are 40% when we're doing something around Centre of Excellence. So even if you think you're a lone voice, you're actually not. There are a lot more people out there who are now engaged in this, who have got a Centre of Excellence in place. And if you search on LinkedIn, there actually now is a Centre of Excellence group. So again, you can start to find like-minded people. Or alternatively, come and find me, and I'll connect you with the other people who we know who are standing up Centre of Excellence.
Well, Ian, another thought on that too. Nobody wants to work with broken systems or broken processes or bad applications. People want to have things run smooth. I don't, maybe it was Mr. Mulford before said, Peter, thank you, I can't remember his first name. Make it simple. The tool should be simple. If you have a complex application that nobody knows how to use, they'll probably want to be part of a COE to give their input to make it better. People want clean data. They don't want to have to, if they can scan and email something, why would they want to put it in an inter-office mail? People have ideas, and like I said before, the collaboration aspect, just asking people what they want, that's a good way to get ideas of how you can move things forward. I think you're right.
Well, thank you for the panel. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for attending this session.